Warning, we're not your attorneys. Please, don't take anything we say as legal advice. I'm Geoff.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Derrick.
And you're listening to the Not So Grand Jury,
which is now sponsored by Moore Law P. LLC.
Trigger warning. This episode will contain descriptions and discussions of suicide and may be upsetting for some listeners.
All right. We are back. Once again, four of us, the three unpaid hosts of the Not So Grand Jury, as well as the unpaid editor. No one gets paid on the Not So Grand Jury, is what we established in the last episode. Colleen, welcome back. It has been 8.5 minutes since we recorded the last episode, so we're doing great. We're going to talk about effectively half Casey Anthony episode and half we hate vaccines sort of kind of episode. So talk to me about, one, why this episode, other than the fact that I told you I wanted the second SVU episode, and two, why this episode? Really, why this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I really tried to find a good Ice-T episode where he drops some good one-liners, but I just couldn't find any that had enough legally interesting things to talk about other than just the Ice-T line. So I just went with the Casey Anthony case. And then, of course, in classic SVU fashion, it can't just be Casey Anthony, but it has to also be vaccines.
Yeah. Let's hit two completely fine things that don't have any public debate whatsoever over them.
So I'll give a brief plot summary. So again, for context setting, this is season 10, episode 19, called Selfish. And so this is in 2009, about 1.5 2 years after the last episode we did in season 9. So Stabler and Benson still the leads. And in this season, we hear from ADA Alexandra Cabot, who is back. Just for context on that, she has just come back from being in witness protection. Because back in season 5, there are threats on her life from a Colombian drug cartel, and they do a fake hit on her. So the squad thinks she was shot and killed. And then an episode later, they go to the middle of nowhere and open a van door, and she's there, and they're like, "Oh, you weren't killed." And so she goes into witness protection, and now 5 years later, she's back.
And so I guess the drug cartel has just vanished? Are we not sure?
So, yeah, the main guy that was putting hits on her was killed in prison, I believe. So she's apparently safe now because there's nobody that would replace him in the drug cartel, right? That would threaten her. Definitely not. She's fine.
No. Oh, my God. This SVU is awesome.
Yeah.
It really is.
So was she off, doing was she, on another TV show or something? Was that what happened? Or
My guess is she had a kid and they had to do something.
That would work, yeah. Went on to live life for a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure.
What's funny is I had a completely third theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is that there was some lawsuit with, the
Maybe she really was in witness protection.
Actually in real life. There are so many directions we could have gone in. I feel like we need to look this up. See, Colleen, you did not do the appropriate research for this because you did not think that you just happening to mention that she came back from being in witness protection would lead to us asking 7 different questions.
Yeah, no idea.
You never know.
Yeah, because I know with someone like Stabler with the actor Chris Maloney, it was just a contract dispute in the 12th season. I think he said he wasn't getting paid enough, so just kind of bounced before the next season, and then of course comes back only a few years ago with his own spin-off Organized Crime. I don't know about Stephanie March, who plays Alexandra Cabot.
Well, I'm gonna do some research right now, so you keep going and we might have to drop some stuff in.
Yeah, I'm on their Wikipedia page, but it's not evident. Okay, I'll keep going and you look at that. Okay, so cold open. Elliot Stabler says he's done with paperwork, so something major is about to occur because they're not just going to go home for the night, right? So a grandmother, Ruth Walker, walks in to the station, says she hasn't seen her granddaughter in days, and accuses her daughter of doing something to her. The daughter, Ashley, is played by Hilary Duff, and this is based on Casey Anthony and the death of Kaylee Anthony. So Ashley claims Sierra is with the babysitter, who doesn't exist. This is a red herring of someone named Maria. I won't go into details, just watch it, but we get a short scene with the lady named Maria who isn't doing well. She thinks a doll is her child. It just kind of goes off a little bit on the plot there. But how she is connected is that Ashley stole her credit card to buy a shovel, which is a red flag. On top of the fact that they're finding that detectives find that Ashley is drunk and partying in Cabo while she claims her baby has been gone. So they can't really add up the evidence at this point that she did anything to her daughter. So Stabler arrests her for credit card theft because that's all they really got. You all get a real treat with this episode with CSU technician Dale Stuckey. Bing, bang, bong.
He's a weird fucking dude.
What was that?
Hey, you guys find anything on the walker shovel?
That's what we're discussing now.
Well, put an ASAP on that soil, Hallie. You're all good.
I did that. Like I said, that's what we're going over now.
We're like one brain. Mm-hmm.
The only thing unique is high levels of polyaromatic hydrocarbons.
Say again?
Polyaromatic hydrocarbons are a byproduct of petroleum. Levels this high, gas had to be leaking straight into the ground.
Like fuel from an underground tank. You thinking Sierra was buried somewhere near a gas station?
Yeah, can you imagine? Like going to a gas station to fill up, buy some smokes. You know, not that I smoke, because that's nasty, but like there's a mom there burying her kid. Like, oh, holy crap.
Hey, Dale, be a real help and bring these files next door.
I'm on it. Hey, bing, bang, bong.
Now you know what I'd have to deal with.
So another spoiler alert with him. So the season finale of this season, Stuckey fucks up a case and goes on to kill a bunch of people to try to save his case, to pin the murders on the guy that was acquitted because of his evidence fuck up.
Wait, I'm sorry. Go back. Which character is this again?
The annoying Emmy kid.
Yeah, the crime scene unit technician.
He goes and just kills a bunch of people?
Yeah, like he cross-contaminates evidence, so the case is thrown out because the whole case was based on that evidence. And so instead of just acknowledging that he fucked up, he kills a few people, plants evidence on them to point towards the guy that was acquitted, including, like, he goes after, like, cops, he goes after the judge, and then ends up killing another CSU technician. He goes after Stabler. Yeah, it's a whole thing. So stay tuned for season finale. It's great. Okay, so they find Sierra's body, but Emmy Warner, who is now back and doing a completely different thing, she rules it was not because of homicide, but encephalitis brought on by the measles. So Ashley confesses that Sierra had a fever and a terrible rash. She wouldn't stop crying, so she spanked her, then she got quiet. Ashley went back to sleep, and the next morning when she woke up, she was dead. But of course, we know that Sierra died of the measles. So her defense attorney is pissed because she said, she could have walked. She didn't actually have anything to do with the death of her daughter.
What happened next?
She was dead. I just panicked and I buried her. And my mom had found out.
You were only thinking of yourself, Ashley. You were afraid you would be blamed.
No. I killed her. Oh my God. I must have hit her so hard that I killed my baby.
No, you didn't.
I don't understand.
Sierra died from measles.
What?
I'll expect your client to be at her first therapy session tomorrow morning.
She tricked me?
For heaven's sake, Alex, she could have walked.
Yeah. But I'm giving her the chance to grow up. I thought DeVere was gonna blow a gasket.
But I think she got what she deserved. I mean, she buried her daughter. She lied about where she was. She sent the detectives on a wild goose chase.
I just want to jump in here real quick. They have this plea bargain scene where Cabot is holding back that she knows full well that her daughter died of essentially natural causes. Nothing is signed. There's no like plea agreement entered. The defendant isn't bound to anything at that moment. And once they get to the judge and try and sentence her, that just it fell apart to me immediately. So it's not worth discussing in depth, but I wanted to jump in and say that was.
I think it's legitimately worth discussing because that was horrible.
Okay, so there's prosecution has evidence that the defendant did not commit the crime. Normally, this falls into Brady material, but the trial hasn't started yet. So, do they have to turn over Brady material at that point? No, not really.
I don't think so. I mean, I think she's.
I don't know if they've been charged with anything yet, right?
To my understanding, she's basically operating as a law enforcement, at that moment, right? Like law enforcement can lie.
Also, there's no. She hasn't been tried or charged at this point, right?
To my knowledge, no.
Or it was just charged with the credit card thing, maybe.
Right. Now, there is a whole thing of like, she is an attorney. Mm-hmm. Attorneys can't lie, but she also didn't lie, right? At no moment did she lie. She asked her to explain everything.
Yep.
Offered a plea deal. And as part of the plea deal, she needed to explain what happened. She explained what happened. Now, what should have happened is be like, great, here is your plea deal. Offer the deal. Have her sign the damn deal. Go into court. Have it approved. And then afterward, walk up to her and be like, BT dubs, your daughter did not die from you, but grow up and be a real adult. And I'm going to go after, That's how it should have worked.
Yeah, that is how that would play out, but that's also a colossally bad idea.
Oh, the whole thing's stupid as shit, but but it's even dumber that she would do it immediately after offering a plea deal with nothing in writing.
Yeah. So I don't know if we should go into this yet, but also like she could be charged with lying to the police. Like there are like actual crimes committed here. Like, and
they really downplay identity theft, which is, not a nothing violation. Stabler is like credit card theft. That's all we've got her on.
I know my rights, and you can't keep me here because I didn't do anything.
I said, Walker, you're under arrest.
Arrest for what?
Credit card theft? That's pretty thin.
Well, I had to charge her with something. She's ready to walk out the door.
She will as soon as she posts bail, which will be minuscule.
Even her mother thinks she did it. We need more time.
Well, then get back in there and wring a confession out of her before she remembers her favorite episode of Judge Judy and lawyers up.
Too late for that.
And I'm like, that's a fairly significant crime right there.
Yeah, it was funny that they said it was so flimsy. It's not flimsy. It's a legitimate crime.
Right. You have her on camera doing it. What?
I also think like lying to the police is a thing you could have charged them for, but whatever.
Well, yes, there's the obstruction aspects and things.
But we'll also get into the point of like, that's actually what Casey Anthony was found guilty of, was basically lying to police. Like she had 4 counts of lying to police and nothing with regards to the serious crimes. But we'll get there in a second.
All right. Well, in classic SVU fashion, it can't just be a case about the Casey Anthony case. It has to have some kind of twist. So let's throw in some super current discourse on measles and anti-vaccine mommies.
Time is a flat circle.
I think that's the 4th time in the last 2 episodes.
Yeah, I got it. I'll find another reference. I'm sorry, guys.
It just keeps being relevant.
But my version of For the Record is now Mike's time is a flat circle.
So there's an interesting divide in the SVU squad. It's not surprising that Munch thinks that vaccine mandates are, quote, a quick slide down the slippery slope of government tyranny. But it is surprising that I think it should be flipped. It usually is flipped. But in this episode, Benson thinks that parents know best and they should be able to vaccinate or not vaccinate their kids. And Stabler thinks, no, parents should vaccinate their kids to protect other kids. Usually it's the other way around. Usually Stabler's the more conservative person. Olivia Benson's a little bit more progressive. We will talk about that in a second, about vaccine mandates and stuff.
At the time, the more the anti-vax community was broadly on the very far left.
Interesting.
It's only since COVID-19 that it's really become a far right thing. So at the time, that was conservative. That was Stabler voicing the conservative perspective of, and frankly, the same perspective of vaccinate your kids. But we'll get to all that.
Interesting. Okay. So Ashley is suing the city of New York because she brought her daughter to a city park. We will also discuss that. And the detectives arrest Monica Stewart for murder for not vaccinating her kid. We'll also get into this later. So fun fact, the defense attorney Trevor Langan is Mariska Hargitay's husband in real life. So that's exciting. And I think Derrick, you've said before that he plays defense attorneys a lot, right?
He
in Blue
loves,
Bloods?
so he's an attorney a lot. So he's a defense attorney. So in Blue Bloods, he's also a defense attorney. So apparently he's developed a role, and I think he's a very reoccurring character in SVU, right? Like he's
there a lot.
Many of the seasons. And I will say he plays a defense attorney very well.
Yeah.
Like he's got that sort of look of like and I think he does this on SVU. He plays a defense attorney that's not a skeevy one, but it's actually like a above board defense attorney as compared to the other defense attorney in this episode for the by the way, we haven't mentioned it. A nice young Hilary Duff is in this episode.
I mentioned that.
Colleen did say, yeah, Lizzie McGuire, baby.
What's really funny was I watched the whole episode, and then at some point I'm like, wait, that was Hilary Duff. So
oh no, that was the first thing I said.
Two different thoughts. Our brains work differently, Mike.
I don't know. Actually, say it was the first thing my girlfriend said.
See, that would make more sense. Now it's making sense.
This must have been one of the first things she did post Lizzie McGuire.
I was actually looking up her IMDb, and I think that's correct because I was actually curious as to like how this came about.
Right, it's interesting
because SVU is a very, like, as you know, SVU brings in some very well known people.
Yeah.
We got Annie Potts too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people that became stars later on, like Sabrina Carpenter, the big pop star now. When she was like 6 years old, she had a cameo back in like 2010 or something, and so people here go on to do good things.
Well, actually, but by the way, the whole point I was trying to get to was that, the defense attorney that represented, in the first part of the episode is the skeevy one, and then he comes in as the sort of above board one, right? Like I think that's also an SVU trope of like there's skeevy defense attorneys, and then there's you're a defense attorney that we think is actually okay at your job and doesn't suck at it. As by the fact that they were busting on her the entire time, be like, oh, you're just being your normal self or whatever.
Is there a lot of repeats between the defense attorneys? Like, do we see them a couple of times a season or through the...
Yeah, like even the woman who's in the beginning part of the episode, she's around a little bit. They definitely have arcs, and they come and go. Like in later seasons, there's a few new ones, but there's definitely a lot that make repeat occurrences.
Gotcha.
Okay. So rounding out the plot summary. So the defense argues that she isn't breaking any laws because her kid isn't yet in school, so vaccines are not yet mandated. But Mommy Monica does her own research, therefore she is a doctor, so it's fine. Monica Stewart is found not guilty even after Alex Cabot is convinced the jury would come back immediately with a guilty verdict. I don't know why she was so confident in that.
Again, SVU has to play both sides.
Yeah, both sides.
I guess. Even though there's not a single person on the planet that thought that if they came back with guilty, that'd be normal.
I just am realizing that in watching these two episodes, I'm not sure what this says about me. I didn't realize that they were two different DAs.
Oh, I didn't realize that until right now. So I don't know what this says about me.
Yeah, they're both women with blonde hair, and they have similar
Dick
vibes.
Wolf has a type.
Somehow his name is so vulgar. It's like, can we bleep out his name? Like, Dick Wolf. Bleep.
Dun.
Dun, dun. Okay, so after the trial, Ashley's mother, Ruth, basically threatens that she won't let Monica get away with it. So it's not surprising when they confront Monica at her house, but then there's a sad ending with Ralph, Ashley's father, taking his own life in front of Monica with a picture of Sierra in his hand. And that's Dick Wolf, baby.
It's really the John Grisham book of we have to have more twists.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what SVU is whatever the first 20 minutes of the episode is, it's not how it ends. There's no way.
No, there's
they gotta
always
do
a red
something
herring.
else.
If there's more than 20 minutes left, we're not even close to.
And here's the time for another trial.
Basically. So I think the only goof that IMDb had was so the missing girl's name is Sierra Walker, but at one point Stabler refers to her as Sierra Miller when interviewing Maria Fernandez.
Should one of us sign up for an IMDb Pro account and start submitting legal goofs to?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Damn it!
Honestly, yeah, that's not bad.
It's not how any of this would work.
You'd have to go episode by episode. I don't know if we want to do that.
We just link to our podcast,
Right.
and we're like,
As was
have an
pointed
hour and a
out
half.
on Not So Grand Jury,
See, now we're talking.
All right, so should we start with Casey Anthony case?
Yeah, so I have been tasked with talking about Casey Anthony. So for the first 20 minutes of the episode, that ends up not being important at all for the most part, but it's the part that gets us to the main trial of SVU, which is it is clearly based upon the Casey Anthony case. For anyone who I guess was born after, let's say, I don't know, in the 2000s, you might not necessarily be aware of it, but anyone before that, I'm sure you were aware of it because it was basically the social media thing of the year in 2011 was the Casey Anthony case. Yes, Geoff?
At the beginning of this whole scandal, I was working at Barnes & Noble and running the magazine section. And my gosh, the number of magazines that came in with her plastered on, every Us Weekly and People
She was the story of 2011, as I recall. Now, I will say in 2011, I was working at a big firm and had, let's just say, a lot going on. I learned many things about it many years later when I had more time. But at the time, I am informed that the world was, at least the United States, was glued to their social media to talk about everything related to Casey Anthony. So to give, for those of you who want a primer on the Casey Anthony case, so Casey Anthony was a 22-year-old single mom who was charged with 3 felonies, including first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and manslaughter of her toddler, Kaylee Anthony. And I'm going to tell you, SVU really sort of leaned into the storyline. Like, they didn't use the exact storyline, but they used a lot of the same sort of premises. So, like, what really got sort of social media in uproar was when there were pictures that surfaced of Casey Anthony at a nightclub shortly after her 2-year-old daughter went missing, which is exactly what happened in this episode, is that there were, pictures of her partying in Atlantic City, theoretically the weekend after that her daughter went missing. But the timeline in the Casey Anthony case was, so in June of 2008, Casey Anthony drove off with her daughter. Her daughter would have been just less than 3 years old at the time. A month later, which is a little different than what happened in this episode, Kaylee's grandmother, Cindy, so Cindy, Casey, and Kaylee, not confusing at all. Cindy, Kaylee's grandmother, reports Kaylee is missing. Casey gets arrested the next day. So apparently she led investigators very similarly to what happened in this episode on a wild goose chase to be like, no, we're here. No, she would be here. No, she would be here, which is certainly what they based it upon. And originally, I think they charged her with it wasn't murder, but it was manslaughter or maybe even something sort of just to keep her in jail. She posted a bond, which was reversed the next day because she was accused of stealing checks from a friend and trying to cash them. So here it was credit card fraud. There it was check fraud. So again, very similar. A couple months later, she's charged with first-degree murder. The skeletal remains were not discovered until 2 months later. So unlike this episode where they discovered them as they are trying to go forward with the bond hearing, which is kind of funny.
Docket ending 2500. The People versus Ashley Walker. 1 count credit card fraud. 1 count second-degree theft.
How does the defendant plead?
Not guilty, Your Honor.
I'll hear the people on bail. Miss Cabot, are we keeping you from some important business?
I'm sorry, Your Honor. The people request remand.
What?
The defendant has established a pattern of theft and obfuscation. We consider her an extreme flight risk.
Miss Walker has no criminal record. To keep her locked up over these 2 charges is ridiculous.
That sounds a little extreme, even for you, Miss Cabot. And if you don't put that phone down, I'm going to hold you in contempt.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. The people are adding another charge to the docket. Murder in the 2nd degree.
Oh, for God's sake, you can't allow a murder charge with no evidence, much less the body of a victim.
Miss Cabot, what's going on here? You seem to be off your game.
I apologize for the distraction, Your Honor. My detectives have just unearthed the body of the victim, Sierra Louise Walker.
Sierra is dead?
I'll allow the additional charge.
No!
How does the defendant plead?
Obviously not guilty.
Bail?
$1 million.
Fine, giving the defendant's risk to flight. Bail is set at $1 million. 5-minute recess.
That was a couple months afterwards. Although if you guys know anything about the Casey Anthony case, there was a whole thing about the guy who discovered the skeletal remains actually discovered them 4 months earlier, and the police kind of blew him off.
Interesting.
And then 4 months later, he called them back to be like, no, they're here. And they discovered Kaylee Anthony's remains like in December.
How legally can you charge someone with murder if you don't have the body? Like that's been done before.
It has certainly been done before. I think at the time they were still unclear as to what exactly, like she could have been alive.
Right.
Like, I think that was sort of part of it. And in fact, that's actually what happened in the SVU episode is that like they didn't actually add in the murder until they discovered the remains. Right. And like, let's be honest, we've talked about this a couple times on the podcast, or at least once, there's motive, opportunity, and means. Like you typically you need a body. That is one way to prove the person is in fact dead. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that, that makes it much harder to even prove a crime was committed, let alone that they did all the other things, right? And so December of 2008, the Kaylee's skeletal remains were discovered. And a month later, and this goes to the whole suicide part of this episode, George Anthony, which is Kaylee's grandfather, was taken into custody. He had a suicide attempt, and they basically took him to, into basically a facility so that he wouldn't, off himself. Now, a little different here where they do it later on after all the vaccine trial and everything else. But again, welcome to SVU. Let's find all of the facts of a known case and let's sort of throw them in different ways. In the Casey Anthony case, on April 13th of 2009, which is 2 weeks before this episode was released, that's when prosecutors announced their intention to pursue the death penalty. So when this case came out, that was all they knew, was that they were pursuing the death penalty for her. Nothing in the case had actually happened. So there was no trial. The trial wasn't until 2 years later. And for anyone who knows anything about the Casey Anthony case, she was ultimately found not guilty. She was of the serious charges, but she was found guilty of lying to police on 4 different occasions, sentenced to 4 years in prison, but she'd already been in prison for about 4 years. So she basically was released soon thereafter. There was an appeal, even though she'd already served the time. An appellate court eventually ruled that there was only 2 charges of lying to police because it was in 2 different interrogations. But in the grand scheme of things, she was found mostly not guilty of the main charges. And so, yeah, I find it very interesting, just for the record, that SVU did not sort of lean into that more. Like that this episode was like, Casey Anthony, no, we're going to move on to something completely different.
I think it is, because they do this a lot. Like they do the rip from the headlines, and it's either like they do it almost word for word. Like there's been some episodes that they're using direct quotes and very direct things, and it makes it obvious. And I think they did that a little bit too much in this episode. So maybe they were like, we have to add in something completely different, so we're not just doing straight from the headlines, So
Yeah. Now, one thing I do have a question on, and I forget if any of us looked into this. What ended up happening right after sort of they got her to a plea deal, which again was not a real plea deal because it was neither signed nor approved by the court. How the fuck can she sue the city?
Ashley Walker is suing the city of New York. Apparently, we are responsible because she brought her daughter to a city park to play.
The lax safeguards of the New York park system allow people with deadly and communicable diseases to mingle freely with the elderly and children. We are suing the city of New York for $100 million, which pales in comparison to the priceless young life which was taken by Monica Stewart in the city. Is your child next?
Yeah.
Honestly, this gets us back to sovereign immunity.
I mean, well, I have a lot of questions about how you can decide.
Because she said it's because the daughter contracted measles in a public park. So you can sue the city?
Yeah, no.
No.
I mean, you can sue anyone for anything. It just might get dismissed immediately.
You have no viable claim against the city because someone with the disease was in a public park.
And frankly, we don't actually know if she filed anything. They said they were going to, right?
Right.
So we don't see the trial at all.
So actually, this is an SU trope, right? Where they have like a press conference, claim they're going to do something, then they move to something completely different, and we never hear about that case ever again.
Yep.
So, to our knowledge,
honestly,
she didn't
that's
ever
a real
file.
life trope too. That's the thing.
it
Like
is. Yes.
I'm gonna sue him for $1 billion, and then you never hear about it again.
Sometimes you go in front of Four Seasons and you make certain claims.
Right. And they don't sue the city, it seems, for seeming to get her to plead to a crime that the city knows has not been committed. They also there's probably a lawsuit in the crime scene unit guy calling the press to really publicize, like screaming, "We've got a body," and calling attention to, like, I imagine there's at least the possibility of something there.
I left that out that he called the press.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all just ignored everything with regards to that guy.
Yeah,
like,
I tried to.
Like, there were times where I actually literally fast forwarded for 20 seconds to be like, I don't want to hear what this guy has to say. Let's move on.
What's funny is I really like that actor in The Riches, which is a mediocre show, but he was good in it. And yeah, but here it was like, what is this character? Why are we spending time on the fact that he is at this crime scene? Well, he's at a place where they think the body's buried, and he's taking a, standard backyard shovel to where they think the body is. And Stabler, who, not known for his restraint, doesn't kick him off the crime scene at the very least. He moves him to one side.
Step lightly, boys. We got a deceased buried in here somewhere.
Stocky, lower your voice. Vultures are looking for anything they can get.
Yeah, I thought you'd like the glory.
Wait a minute. You tipped off the press?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I was just trying to make you guys look good. Don't worry, okay? I'll find Sierra.
We got something! We got something!
See what I just tell you? Okay.
Stocky, be careful.
Hey, do I tell you guys how to do your job?
Actually, yeah.
Is that a doll? I think that's a doll.
Get out of the way.
No, if you're in charge of that investigation and it's your crime scene, that guy's gone. I don't know. I mean, I understand from a screenplay drama perspective, you want to keep the kid around, but man.
Yeah, he just said what's the matter with you? And
yeah.
Right.
I'm curious about that too.
Hi everyone, Derrick here with a brief message. The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by my law firm, Morewa PLLC. One of Morewa PLLC's many practice areas is business law.
If you are a business owner or someone who is thinking of starting up a new or side business, you need a legal team who can efficiently provide you legal counsel, keeping you and your business away from potential legal issues, and if necessary, representing you in any disputes that do arise. We pride ourselves on being cost efficient while also getting to know our clients. If you want less stress and more support, you need More Law. If you would like to set up a free consult, please click on the link in the show notes, visit our website, www.mooreatty.com, that's mooreatty.com, or email us at contact@mooreatty.com. And now, back to the show.
So anyway, let's jump right into the vaccine part of this episode, which, again, I think we can all agree this would not fucking happen
Not
in
super
real
current.
life.
Not really relevant.
No, this would not happen in real life.
All right.
So,
Geoff, you want to take it away?
So yeah, let's start with charging someone with murder because their child is unvaccinated and another child or anyone else contracts a disease as a result. That's not how the murder statutes or manslaughter or any of those statutes work. The penalties for not vaccinating a child when you are obligated to, which as the show mentions is, once they're, attending public schools and things like that, is a fine and they can be removed from school and things like that. You aren't responsible for any, if you don't get the flu vaccine and a child gets the flu because your kid was at school while they had the flu, there's no liability there. There's no legal responsibility on your part, unfortunately. And I'll say part of the reason that vaccine mandates are important is because it is intrinsically preventing you from doing a harm to someone else that you have no control over. You might not know you have a disease. You might not know the other person is unvaccinated. You might not know for weeks whether the other person contracted it or how any disease you might have is communicable. This is kind of the reason that government regulations exist, is to solve these sort of tragedy of the commons problems.
I guess we're going back to, would they have brought this case to begin with, but also what are the penalties of not being vaccinated? And as you said, the penalties are little to none. The only thing I could think of is there is a growing trend of people having fraudulent vaccine cards or fraudulent proof of vaccination for their kids. And I do wonder if that would create a situation where you're in a school that requires everyone to be vaccinated. You cannot attend if you're not vaccinated. The parent submitted fraudulent proof of vaccination. Would that create some form of liability? This is the hypothetical I could think of.
I mean, it would be committing a fraud on the government
than they have here. Yeah.
Well, fun fact: season 16, they have one of those episodes.
Okay.
Oh, really?
On what?
Because it says vaccine. On an anti-vaccine situation where basically someone, I think it's measles again, where there's a measles outbreak.
Another measles episode?
It's Olivia Benson's kid on the show.
Correct.
Gets the measles.
Right. So Olivia Benson's kid gets measles, and I don't remember the exact episode, but I believe someone falsifies a vaccine card or something.
I think it might.
Because unlike here, where as we discussed, there was no legal obligation for the woman to have her kid vaccinated. There, and maybe we'll have to take on this episode at some point, they're in school and they had to be vaccinated, but I think they faked the vaccine.
Oh yeah, that's
card.
the Rainbow Party episode. That's a good one. You know what a Rainbow Party is.
Sadly.
OSV. Yes.
So
it's actually funny, Mike, you bring it up that there was a better argument. It does happen 7 seasons later or 6 seasons later.
Yeah, no, it's, I am unfortunately aware that this is a thing that happens, the fraudulent cards. So I that's the closest I could think of to having real liability.
It happened during COVID. People fake cards.
Yes.
Stuff like that.
COVID
and
is
we're going to
happening
get
now with the anti-vaxxers.
We're going to get to COVID in a second, but before I get there, this is we talked about it in the last episode of the show playing, doing this both sidesing of issues that really are pretty clear cut, and they do it again here. Now, obviously, vaccines are controversial right now for no reason. Get vaccines. If you are at any risk of getting a disease and there's a vaccine for it, get the vaccine for it. I'll just say the fear mongering around vaccines is almost entirely just based on false evidence. You can go back to all that Andrew Wakefield scandals. He was a doctor in the UK that started the whole vaccines cause autism thing based on a study he did out of he had a monetary interest in finding the MMR vaccine to be problematic. He has been stripped of his medical license because his study was so faulty and his practices so faulty. And just get vaccinated. Now, the show does some both sidesing here of like, well, but don't you know there's a government fund that, if someone suffers a side effect, then the government just pays it. And that is true. The government has a program where they track, essentially after you get a vaccine, they track any side effect or any medical issue you have after that for something like 6 months. And if there are any claims, the government pays them because the government wants to encourage companies to make vaccines, and having a company make a product that basically everyone is going to take, and some people will inevitably have side effects for, having them pay out discourages companies from making vaccines. That's why the government does that. And they don't even really try and link, the reported medical issue to the vaccine. It's really anything that happens to you medically within 6 months of getting a vaccine. And just hearing them talk about all this without providing hearing them talk about this.
I mean, that is supposed to be the defense,
right?
That is the defense presenting their argument. So it's
maybe in the law and order psyche, therefore it's all suspect. But they don't present it that way. Like you mentioned, the defense attorney here is the above board good guy defense attorney, sort of. It just watching that really, really bothered me.
Yeah, but also he has a pretty straightforward argument.
I mean, he does. He doesn't have to go into all the vaccine stuff. His argument can be, she didn't commit a crime.
Right. She had no legal obligation to do what they're claiming she had to do.
Yeah. You don't have,
That's it. That's the case.
And
I'm actually a little shocked, and again, they don't get into this. That could be an MTD. That could have been a motion to dismiss, I think. If I think so. Like their argument is, if they make the best argument they possibly could on the facts, I still think that they could get out on the legal side.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get there. That, of course, this is the one time where they could do a motion to dismiss, and of course the SVU doesn't do it because that would make way too much sense.
Right. And could someone explain to me why the Special Victims Unit is doing contact tracing and stuff?
Measles.
2 cases reported in the last month. One before Sierra died and one right after.
Which means somebody's still out there spreading the virus.
What's next? The Black Plague? Incubation period is 7 to 21 days, which means somebody could be infected, not know it, and still be infecting other people. Most likely children under 12 months old who are too young to receive the measles vaccination.
And if they're exposed, it's not a matter of if, but when they get sick. So we gotta find out who that little girl might have come into contact with.
Well, after I roped up that confession out of Ashley, there is no way she's gonna help us out. Do we have any other information on patient 0?
The first case is a kid who was visiting from Venezuela. She's already gone back home, but we've notified the consulate. Second case, Dennis Faber from Watertown, New York, but there was no phone number on the emergency room medical report.
Maybe he doesn't have a phone. Watertown has a large Amish community.
Why?
There's no fucking. There's a bunch of issues here. This goes back to what we were talking about with the prior SVU episode, where like there's an ethical standard that they have to think there's a reasonable likelihood of conviction, and that gets completely ignored. This is. Someone had a fever dream that they thought that this would be a good topic for them to pursue. Or they really wanted some, I don't know.
There's so many SVU episodes. It's like, this wouldn't be an SVU case. A lot of them are just homicide cases.
Sure. The CDC would get involved because, you seem to have a measles outbreak going on in Manhattan, which we're probably the worst place to have a disease outbreak. I can't imagine anything in the last, I don't know, decade that might get that point across. But regardless, I just want to talk a bit about vaccine mandates, and because there is for a long time until COVID, there was a well-developed line of cases that said essentially, the government can require you to get a vaccine. You can have a medical exemption. Some states, there was no obligation to, but plenty of jurisdictions provide religious exemptions. Not all, but some do provide religious exemptions. But the government can require you to get a vaccine because it's a public health concern. And
what did they charge her with again?
That was never made clear.
Is it criminal negligence? Is it like homicide? Like it's such a.
Do they ever straight up say what she's charged with?
Yeah, if it's so nebulous that we don't know what she's charged with, it's probably not a good lawsuit. Not a good case.
I do think they say murder. Charges murder at one point.
Now what?
You're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent.
Arrested for what?
The murder of Sierra Walker.
Oh, it was murder. Murder! Unlawful killing with malice aforethought. She intended to kill him. Murder?
This isn't even negligent.
Right. This is not even like involuntary manslaughter, like you got in a car accident kind of thing. This
is bad.
It would have to be some kind of manslaughter or negligent homicide thing, and it's a bad case for any of those either.
Yeah,
but,
We're all over the place here. But so preserving public health is a compelling government interest, and having people get vaccines is the least restrictive means of ensuring that communicable diseases are contained. Because you know what a more restrictive means of doing that is? Lockdowns. And when there aren't vaccines available, you have to go to lockdowns. And this was understood from 1905, a case called Jacobson v. Massachusetts, where the Supreme Court said, the liberty secured by the Constitution of the United States to every person within its jurisdiction does not import an absolute right in each person to be, at all times and in all circumstances, wholly freed from restraint. There are manifold restraints to which every person is necessarily subject for the common good. On any other basis, organized society could not exist with safety to its members. Society based on the rule that each one is a law unto himself would soon be confronted with disorder and anarchy. Real liberty for all could not exist under the operation of a principle which recognizes the right of each individual person to use his own, whether in respect to his person or his property, regardless of the injury that may be done to others. And that is the rationale that the court used there to say, yes, the government can require you to get a vaccine. And then COVID happened, and COVID became a political issue. And a bunch of people started claiming religious reasons for not taking the vaccine who had never had religious objections to any vaccines previously. People were saying it was, a hoax or all this crazy conspiracy theory stuff. And we got a bunch of cases that went up to the Supreme Court where people were, they were, whether it was lockdowns or being required to get vaccines to, enter public spaces and things like this. And somehow the government's ability to preserve the public health was worsened by the COVID-19 controversy. Particularly a pair of cases. A lot of this happened on what's called the shadow docket, which sounds far more dramatic than it really is. The Supreme Court has normal cases that it hears, and then it has sort of accelerated cases that it hears on emergency basis that aren't really cases that are decided. It doesn't matter. A pair of cases, Roman Catholic Diocese v. Cuomo and Tandon v. Newsom, essentially provided carte blanche for claiming religious exemptions to vaccine mandates and lockdowns, manifestly harming the public health. And it's
Geoff.
Yes.
Interesting that it was California and New York were the cases.
Yeah. I don't know why those two very populous states might have been where these cases cropped up.
Yeah, it was just interesting you mentioned those names. That was not the names I was expecting you to say for those cases.
No, well, yeah. As a result of these cases, if the government provides an exemption to a public health restriction, whether for medical reasons or whatnot, it has to provide an exemption for religious reasons as well. Because otherwise the law is not neutral and generally applicable, which is a free exercise standard under the First Amendment. Never mind the fact that, oh my gosh, I could go on for another hour just about that, but I'll stop. There's every reason for the government to want to have the populace be vaccinated. There are people with medical conditions who can't get vaccines and need the protection of herd immunity. The wider the exemptions are to getting vaccines, the more danger those people are in a way that they have no control over. And protecting the public in those situations is one of the main reasons we have government at all. This kind of thing infuriates me. I don't know, the both sidesing here was just ridiculous. But also the fact that they even pursued this case, because it made the situation so ridiculous on its face.
Okay,
sorry.
So we brought this up. We either brought this up in our last episode or we edited it out of our last episode. But we do need to get into this because, as we are aware, for the DA to bring a case, they don't want to bring bad cases and make bad precedent. So, and honestly, I do think that most TV shows sort of, put a fine point on this. If there is an important case that could be a case of first impression that could make future cases much harder or much easier, you bring the DA and get the DA's blessing on it, right? Mm. Which weirdly is what they do here, and she's fucking fine with it.
Well, look, she's got no case. People get sick in public places all the time.
It's an election year. This story is front page across the country. The phones are ringing off the hook down at City Hall with people wanting to know if it's safe to bring their kids to the park.
What are we going to do?
Over 1 million children in this country who are old enough to be vaccinated have not been immunized for measles. We're sitting on a time bomb. The DA wants the public to feel safe. Arrest Monica Stewart.
Yeah, because it's an election year.
Why?
I mean, in theory, the standard is not just like, will you win, but it's will this hold up on appeal? And there's no, I'm as pro-vaccine as anybody could be, but I don't think anyone can say with a straight face that you're going to win at all, or if you did win, it was going to hold up on appeal.
Yeah, this is not a murder charge.
Is there anything they could have done outside of murder charge on this to go after the woman?
Unless she lied, like if she had a fraudulent vaccine card and was allowed into the park, that's why I was making that hypothetical before. Mm-hmm. I don't, because you don't have she doesn't have any duty to someone else's child in that situation. It's not, there's no crime against being unvaccinated. I don't know what theory could be.
There could be an argument to be made for civil liability. So not criminal charges or anything like that. But if, my child dies because you brought your kid knowing they were sick and unvaccinated.
Also, we didn't talk about the implausibility of knowing who case zero was in this situation. Like in real life, there's a measles outbreak. Well, your kid had measles, so they must have gone to mine. It's there might have been 300 intermediaries that we're not aware of. It's just it's so difficult to find case zero on anything.
Yeah, they did. They did identify it really quickly.
Yep. Measles.
Because she has nothing else to do as medical examiner.
Oh, by the way, we didn't talk about that. Why is she also the expert on vaccines? Why is...
She's the expert in everything medical related in any capacity in any situation. We all know.
Is she also like testifying for like malpractice suits on like plastic surgery and like just coming in for everything? Like someone has a lawsuit about their vet, she comes in to testify. Like
she's jack of all trades.
I think I don't know how it works in real life, but it seems like she's assigned.
Not like that.
Well, sure, but she's assigned to the SVU squad. So whatever they do, she is the expert. I don't know how the ME's office works in real life with that. I assume they have more of a focused.
I imagine they're specialists. Yeah. Going back to whether there's other ways that the mother could be liable here. The mother of the unvaccinated child. The mother of patient 0, I guess they were both unvaccinated kids, but the mother of patient 0, again, I think could be held civilly liable. And, I will acknowledge that I am not an expert here and I'm just going on my memory, but my recollection is that there have been a number of instances where people have been held liable for intentionally communicating, for example, sexually transmitted infections to others, either knowingly or recklessly. And I think if you're a parent of an unvaccinated and sick child, whether vaccinated or not, and knowingly or recklessly put them in a situation where they will communicate that disease to others, there is, I think, a potential for liability there. But again, I'm just going off my recollection. I have not looked into this specific question.
I mean, I'm confident that's the case. And in fact, I think actually some states have that as like a sort of separate offense.
Oh, I would not be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. I know in my practice, I get some very random questions. And I do recall looking this up at one point and realizing that some states it was a misdemeanor and some it was a felony. It's certainly, if you are knowingly transmitted an STD, there are a number of criminal penalties that you could face.
There's a few episodes about that.
Shocked.
That seems entirely within SVU's
that makes sense.
In fact, I'd be shocked there isn't an episode or two every season on that.
Yeah,
because I feel like
I can name like 2 or 3. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that makes sense.
Anything else we haven't hit?
Well, one thing I actually wanted to bring up, and maybe Geoff, you brought it up early on, which was like, how do we know that's how they got necessarily the measles? Like, it's actually, and granted, there's a very limited number of measles outbreaks.
I mentioned this. It's incredibly unlikely that you would ever be able to prove this definitively, right. Especially with measles, like the most transmissible disease, and it more likely is that there's like probably 100 people infected at roughly the same time, and you just don't know.
That's probably what I mean. One reason it's easier to apply to sexually transmitted infections is because you can directly trace the contact.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, I don't have much else because this episode is really 2 different episodes, and the entire first half of the episode is just to set up the second half of the episode.
Yeah. I do want to note with regard to the Casey Anthony section, there were several interactions that the police had with the grandmother and mother that would not happen in real life because like the grandma tells Benson and Stabler that her car after her daughter used it smelled like a dead body. Benson and Stabler the daughter is cleaning out the back of the car and they have brought grandma with them to confront the daughter about the smell in the backseat of the car. That would never happen.
Time to go inside. Let's go.
No, so what are you doing? Cleaning out the trunk of your car here?
I was on a trip. A cooler tipped over, some meat must have spoiled or something.
Or something?
You think I'm lying? Half a pound of ground chuck. We were gonna grill burgers.
So where is Sierra?
I told you. She's with Maria, my sitter.
Well, and relatedly, listen, I'm not an expert in how dead bodies smell. I
Not
can
like
tell
bad
you,
beef.
I can tell you it's not bad beef.
It's not burgers.
I can tell you that any detective who's in the special victims unit who has dealt with dead bodies before could tell the difference between a dead body smell and bad beef.
Maybe except for
100%.
iced tea. Maybe iced tea wouldn't do that.
Iced tea is still
Are you
confused.
telling
I could tell the difference
iced-
between the smell of death and the smell of iced tea. So, and you can interpret that however you want.
I'm not sure if iced tea knows that beef goes bad.
Bad as in good or bad as in...
There's a few SVUs where, like, I'm not saying they're like A-star famous, but they're famous. Like, they're a known commodity.
One of my favorites is Mike Tyson plays a rape victim after he got out of jail for rape.
God damn it.
Wow.
Oh man, that... Wow, all right.
Like
on that note,
like there are certainly, like, you know, famous guest stars where you're like, I've seen a couple of those episodes where you see the episode and you're like, I can't picture them as anything else other than who they actually are, right?
I feel like
Which is kind of
Law and Order is for New York-based actors as Doctor Who is for virtually any actor in the UK.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, they either appeared on it before they were big, or they appear on it now as like, oh, look who we got for...
It's one of those things, like, they're filming it like 2 blocks away. You want to be the guest star this week?
And a lot of Broadway actors. A lot
absolutely.
Of Broadway.
Patty LuPone is all over Law and Order, the original series.
Well, in fact, a good friend of mine, Josh War. Josh, I have no idea if you listen to our podcast, but I hope you do. Like, Josh, who is a sort of like off-Broadway actor, but also director and sort of known in the, you know, in the New York sort of off-Broadway community, he is briefly in an SVU episode. Like, I do feel like they will run their way through a lot of the sort of actors in the in NYC.
Yeah.
I will also say, as someone who lived in New York City for 10 years, I have accidentally stumbled on 4 different filmings of Law and Order while I was there.
Interesting.
Including one time literally walking through an SVU episode. And again, this is New York City. So, like, I am in the head down, AirPods in, just get me to my next location. I walked about a block after I sort of had walked through a bunch of people standing on Central Park West and was like, I think that was Ice-T. And turn around and they are filming a New York City Marathon episode when it was not the New York City Marathon. And I barely noticed because welcome to living in New York City. And I need to find that episode, and I think we need to do it, Colleen.
I tried to find one around that time period. I don't know an episode that features a marathon.
I know the exact date because I literally sent you a text of like, this is it.
And I was like, okay, in about 6 months, we should see this episode drop.
Well, and in fact, on Ice-T's Instagram, he posted a photo on that date of filming with the guys.
It could have been a crossover too. They sometimes do crossover with like organized crime or the original.
So we need to find that fucking episode so I can talk about
Derrick's
the episode.
in the background.
I can talk. I want to talk about an episode that I walked through while they were filming.
I was nearly stumbled through the filming of a scene from the John Krasinski, the Jack Ryan series. In DC. And I'm surprised that doesn't happen more often because things must be being filmed in DC all the time.
So there's a fair amount of filming in DC. I will say, unlike New York, where there's a few places they film a lot, DC's kind of all over the place. And also, we're not walking near the Capitol. Like, there's certain places they film a lot at where we're not walking through on a daily basis.
I suppose that's true.
And I think a lot of it, too, is just like they do their car chase or they run by the Capitol and then they film everywhere else.
Right. a lot of stuff that's quote unquote set in New York or DC is actually filmed elsewhere.
My favorite is in DC filming, they somehow make it from like the Pentagon to the Capitol back out to Tyson's Corner in like 10 minutes.
6 seconds.
Yeah.
For those unaware, that is a 2-hour trip.
Yeah.
Right.
Depending on traffic.
Depending upon the time of day, but it could be worse. Yes.
Yeah.
I went out to Reston, Virginia the other day, and it took me way too long. So, yes. All right. Mike, you started with the last episode. You can start with this episode. Tell us your vote.
I'm going to surprise you guys. It was incredibly legally accurate. This is actually the My Cousin Vidi of TV shows that are completely wrong on everything. They got it all wrong. Nothing makes sense. We don't know what they charge the person with. It did give me a new theory where if you don't know what they're actually charging the person with, it's probably bad. They probably fucked something up. So I'm grateful for that. As far as did I like it? I liked it better than the last episode, but no, I don't. I would not watch this show without you guys. So,
okay,
no on both fronts.
Jeff, are you going to be a yes on? I know you're not going to be a yes on one of them. Are you going to be a yes on the other one?
Yeah, I toyed with starting this episode with, guys, I have no notes on this. I don't know. I have nothing to say.
It's perfect.
Yep.
Chef's kiss, perfect.
It's perfect.
Jeff's kiss.
Oh, God damn.
That's the title of this episode.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cheers.
We need merch.
We do.
Every episode has a different Mike saying. That's actually like what the underlying title of it is.
Mm-hmm.
J-Store Smudge.
As far as enjoyment, this was a more fun watch. I was able to get through this in one sitting. The vaccine stuff is infuriating to me. Also, it's just kind of all over the place. Because one moment it's this, it's the Casey Anthony stuff, and then it becomes a vaccine debate. I'm going to continue to copy Mike and say it was an improvement, but I'm outside of the context of this show, outside of the context of this podcast, I don't plan on watching any more episodes. Yeah, I might go back and revisit the original series. But
TOS? You're okay with TOS?
Well, tentatively, I haven't watched any of it in 20 years, so I don't know.
Well, they're back. They are back with their new seasons.
Oh, okay. I was totally unaware. Okay.
Yeah, they took like a 20-year break or 15-year break, and they started again with the original series like 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know why.
The original cast, too?
I mean, no, because some of the main casts have passed, I think. But who's Sam Waterston? I think he's still around. He's still
yeah, he plays the head DA now.
Yeah. He makes a few appearances in SVU. He's still around in the original series. But no, it's a completely different cast.
All right. Well, once again, you made my life easy because what I say doesn't really matter. This may shock you. The law is wrong. So we're going to go no there. Okay. As Jeff said, this was an easier one to get through. I'm going to say I actually enjoyed this episode. Now it's like a technical enjoyment. It's more of a, like, if I really divorce myself of all the legal shit, I found it entertaining. But really the reason I found it entertaining was the second watch around, I spent half of it trying to figure out why Hilary Duff had done this episode. So maybe it's like a technical dissent of, like, if you really get into the legal background, maybe this isn't, we shouldn't have taken this case to begin with, but I'm not sure if that's true. But anyway, I'm okay with this. I've also, so Colleen had talked about this at the start of last episode. I think our mom was a big, like, Law and Order generic fan. I think we are a household that enjoys cop shows. My mom and I have completely independently watched a lot of Blue Bloods, which I'm sure I'm going to bring up at some point on this podcast. And to the point where we've had, like, active conversations about.
She loves what's his face? The Richard from Friends.
I like how you said Richard from Friends.
The mustache guy.
That's my favorite part of this.
Burt Reynolds?
What is this?
Tom Selleck.
Yep, Tom Selleck.
Oh, Tom Selleck's in that? Interesting.
So Tom Selleck...
he's the Blue Blood.
Tom Selleck is the New York City Police Commissioner in Blue Bloods.
Yeah, he's Blue Blood.
I
He's
will give him credit. He is he's very good in the role.
Yeah, he's good.
Oh, now I want to like pitch a movie called Blue Blood. It's a superhero who's just very, very high society.
Okay.
But Derrick, I hear what you're saying with the setting the legal aspects aside. It was you were entertained by it. That's my attitude toward the show Lucifer.
Well, and we all have those.
Yeah.
I mean, we are going to discuss Suits soon, which I have to divorce myself from because I was in a big firm for 5 years. Sure. There are certain moments of it that give me Vietnam-like flashbacks, and there's also certain moments of like, this wouldn't fucking happen, and I have to be like, just watch it for what it is. Like, you just have to sort of divorce yourself from the scenario.
Well, and I think when I talk to like some of my friends, especially some of my more progressive friends that I like this show, they're like, I didn't expect that because I think that the criminal justice system should be abolished. And I mean, honestly, I think that this show needs to be canceled. Like, I will continue to watch every episode of it, but I mean, there was a big push in 2020 to cancel this show, and I was like, yeah, this show should not be on the air because of especially of how they're portraying police violence. And I think that too many people in the world are like, this is real. Like, if I'm
all for canceling the show, but mostly for the quality purposes. But
I'm just concerned for the health of the actors. Like,
yeah, I don't know how
Mariska Hargitay needs to move on, do some other stuff.
Yeah, I don't know how.
She's gonna get paid off this for the rest of her life. She can.
Yeah, no, like, this is a job that she's very happy to have.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've heard that it's just such a well-oiled machine. Like, guests that go on there. There's a good recap podcast of SVU, That's Messed Up, and they have a lot of guests on, and they're like, it's the most well-oiled machine. They know exactly what they're doing. I mean, I hope by season 27, but even in earlier seasons, they're like, it's very well done. They know exactly what they're doing. So maybe if you just know exactly what you're doing every day when you're going to work, you can do this 27 years in a row. But I don't know, just the subject matter. Mariska Hargitay does a lot on this issue outside of work too. She has a foundation on just the backlog of rape kits.
I think I read something about that at some point.
Yeah, she does a lot of good work on that. Yeah, I don't know how she continues to do it.
Well, short version, Colleen, I think we can say thank you so much in a non-sarcastic tone for having us watch these 2 episodes.
Well, and I'll just add, I actually think I enjoyed the first episode we watched more. I think it's just the vaccine stuff just fucking infuriates me.
No, it's fair. Not unfair.
Not that torture is a great thing to...
Well, I will say, like, I actually wanted to like the first episode because, again, as I said, I'm an international law fan. It's so fucking bad. I just couldn't get to it. Having said that, I'm confident we're going to watch more SVU over the over the Not So Grand Jury time because they are
I'm so excited, guys.
I can pick out some STD episodes. I'll try to find a better iced tea episode. Just name your issue. I'll find it.
Can we get we really need in the future a true iced tea episode where it's just
I know. I binge some of
I want an episode with clowns. Find me an episode with clowns in it.
Oh, there's one. There's 2, I think, on clowns.
I know. I'm sure. I know. I could say anything. Find me an episode with avocados in it.
Again, it's 26 seasons. They've got something.
Clowns, definitely. There's like an It
Mr.
themed.
Rogers.
There's a weird It themed episode, I think, when It was.
There's a good. I'm in for that. That's my.
There's one called Bring in the Clowns. Yep.
There's also a good avocados episode that involves SWAT, so we can do that for you, Mike, if you really want to. We can do a SWAT episode involving avocados.
One of the issues I'm focusing on at work at the moment is requiring clergy to be mandatory reporters when they learn about child abuse. And I imagine there's 1 or 2.
Oh, there's a whole 3 episode arc.
About...
Yeah. There's a whole 2 or 3 episode arc on the Catholic Church. So
they could do a whole season. It's the most depressing season of television ever.
I was gonna say, I think that's every cop show has some arc on the Catholic Church.
Well, and they have one in early seasons because Stabler's this big Catholic boy, so of course they have to have him question his faith and be in a church and etc. And then there's one later in the season. And then there's like IAB that comes in. There's all this stuff. Yeah,
that's something that SVU does a lot more of than Law and Order the original series, is like the private lives of the detectives and the attorneys. And
oh yeah,
because Law and Order proper, you might see them in the bar after, at the end of the day, and that was the extent of like their off-duty lives that we saw, and I kind of prefer that.
So I will say, Geoff, you actually might enjoy Blue Bloods because it is very much actively about the personal lives of the family.
No, I'm saying I prefer the original series where we don't have to worry about
because
I just want I want the murder of the week.
Actually, that tracks. You are boring like that. That makes sense. Yeah. So when Mike wanted the monster of the week, when it came to what the hell is the show?
X-Files.
Yes, Geoff wants the murder of the week.
Yeah, the monster murder of the week.
I'll get my character dramas from like Andor.
Who killed Dracula?
All right. I think we've hit as much as we possibly can in this episode without killing ourselves. All right. Good times.
The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by Morwa PLLC.
The opinions expressed in the Not So Grand Jury are those of the hosts themselves and not of their respective employers.
The theme music for the Not So Grand Jury is from Gustav Holst's Jupiter and is in the public domain.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you want to suggest future movies, or even if you want to offer corrections, you can email us at notsograndjury@gmail.com or message us on any of our social media accounts.
The Not So Grand Jury is copyright 2025, all rights reserved.